How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good, Matt. I'm good, man. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you, man.
Good to see you, man. It's exciting to be on with you. Happy New Year and all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was fun yesterday going on your mastermind and laying down some information. I really enjoyed that. I appreciate you having me on there.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, man. It's something that has probably been the most exciting thing about this year so far. Last year, we cultivated this great group of agents, as you know, and
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about, the common theme between all those people. But last year, we did a good job of cultivating that group. Everybody who's part of the group, it's really a community. And then this year, we all kind of agreed that the theme is accountability. So,
Yeah.
like you saw, we've got a dashboard. People are filling out Monday, what we call a Monday mindset accountability form, where they're
Yeah.
making that public declaration, what
Right.
their goals are for the week. And then on Friday, they're filling out a Friday finishing form and
Yeah.
measuring the progress that's made. And then we're following what we consider the second rule of making a real true commitment, and that's that we're making it hurt by on every one of those calls twice a week that like you were on, we pull it up and we
Yeah.
hold each other accountable. So it's been fun.
It was really neat and interesting to me to watch the way that the accountability changes people's mindsets almost instantly. You had a couple people on there that had phone call reluctance, and it's like once they started talking about it, all of a sudden, well, I guess I could do this, or I could do it this way, or we could find a way around the uncomfortable and live uncomfortably.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I believe, and a lot of others do too, that when you transition into a growth mindset, you start becoming solution focused
Yeah.
and less problem focused. And so
Right.
anytime we can switch that perspective or the mental model that we're approaching things with, anytime we can make a switch like that and get more focused on the solution, I think we grow and we tend to enjoy it more.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard to do that on your own, and that's why a mastermind community is great for that sort of thing, because
Yeah.
regularly you have people resetting your switch.
Right.
Like in my garage, I've got a circuit breaker where that GCI switch flips all the time. Sometimes I got to go out there and reset it to
Right.
get it to work properly. But
Yeah.
sometimes we all need that.
I couldn't picture doing this business like when I first started with, just kind of flying by the seat of my pants without having somebody, here at where we are, we've got Steve McCarthy that, you know, is my personal accountability coach, and he makes sure that I stay on top of my phone calls, make sure I stay on top of doing all my work, and I just couldn't picture not having that and still having the level of success that I've found, you know.
Yeah, it's tough to imagine, especially when you found somebody like that has stretched you. There's the
Yeah.
Navy SEALs or Special Forces show that's on TV right now, where they're
Right.
taking celebrities and having them go through challenges. And a lot of that philosophy is about like stretching a rubber band. You stretch it, and then you let go, and then you stretch it a little bit more, and it goes a little farther, and then you let go and relax it, and you stretch it a little bit more. And so when you find somebody who has stretched you and you've gone further than you thought, it's hard to imagine what you could have done by yourself. I know Steve's put in
Yeah.
the work. He's
Yeah.
stretched himself, and other people have helped him stretch farther than he could himself. But it's definitely hard to imagine. I spent, as I told you on one of our private conversations, I spent almost 20 years in the investment world. So
Right.
those of you that are old enough to have seen Glengarry Glen Ross, or the movie Wall Street,
Right.
or Boiler Room, or these days Wolf of Wall Street, like I lived that environment for almost 20 years, and it was, when I was younger, fun,
Yeah.
made a whole bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
But man, it was, hardcore. ABC always be closing, one call close. I mean, the stuff that you hear, see, even the stuff in the background got scared when I talked about it. I had some fell out of the shelf. But but the advantage that you see in all those movies, I tell you one thing you don't see in any of those examples is you never see somebody in a room by themselves.
Right.
Because you can't usually manufacture the kind of positive mental attitude and the kind of enthusiasm that you need to do that job by yourself. And man, today, because of COVID and a lot of other things, a lot of people are at home in an office, or as we like to say, sometimes, you're sitting in your silo by yourself in isolation, and it's tough to get motivated to call your database, to get motivated to call expired and for sale by owners, to get motivated to go out and door knock like you do.
Yeah.
It's tough when you're the player, the coach in the crowd who's supposed to rah you on. It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough.
I remember when COVID first started, we were working at home, and it was a nightmare because, we had the kids like right there because, they were doing their schooling from home right at the kitchen table. And then we had Janelle and I, Janelle's my wife. We had just a big old desk, that we had set up, and she was on one side of it and I was on the other. And it's like trying to get anything done was just, it wasn't working out, I don't know how anyone can work from the home. Plus your mindset's just different when you're at home. Like personally, when I'm at home, I just want to be with the kids. I want to be with Janelle. I want to be just like hanging out on the couch, quiet, watching TV, doing at home stuff, not having to grind.
Who wouldn't, right? Who wouldn't? That's comfortable and that's enjoyable. And there's a German term called Sitzfleisch. Sitzfleisch. And what it means is it means to sit in one place for an extended period of time, focused on doing one thing. And when you have all those other distractions on, it's hard to do that.
Right.
And I think it's funny you mentioned everybody's schedule has adjusted. Recently, I learned a story from Joe DeSena, who created the Spartan races, for those of you that are familiar. And he was sharing he was in China touring offices, and he was in an office that had 1,200 or so employees. And he's walking through one of the floors, and he looks over and he sees like some people with their head on their desk taking a nap. And he goes to the guy who's giving them the tour. He's like, "What's up with those people?" And he goes, "Oh, they work 20-hour shifts and we let them take a nap, for like 15, 20 minutes a day." And then he goes, and so then I keep walking a little bit further and I see like tents. I'm talking like North Face tents in the corner. And I'm like, "What's up with those people?" "Oh, those people work 3 days nonstop and we allow them to catch up and get a nap." And so, his point was this whole thing about a 4-day work week, whatever your opinion is on that, if we have to compete against that, we're going to have a hard time doing it by creating more distractions by trying to work in a silo at home, just to relate it back to what we were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were talking about some race yesterday that was like, because there's like the Spartan race, which is super hard or whatever. And then what was the other one that you were talking about a little bit? It sounded just nuts.
Well, the name of it, I'm sure, just that rules out 99% of the population. It's called the death race.
Yeah.
And to believe, I had never heard of the death race. It's not that cheesy Quentin Tarantino movie either. This is a real deal. And so, I run a lot. I just got back literally in time to make this call. Just got back from running a 5K, ran 13 or 15 miles on Sunday. And, I've run the 4x4 by 48 every 4 hours, or every 4 hours, 4 miles for 48 hours, and did ultra marathons and all that. And but I had never heard about this death race. Oh my God. And so you can't really even find out information about it. It happens out in the mountains of Vermont. It's thrown by Joe DeSena, who started the Spartan races. There's about 200 to 300 people that will apply each year. You don't know when it exactly starts. You don't have a clue like what's involved, the obstacles. You don't know how long it is. It's just called over at a particular time when they think that you've suffered enough. It's just unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And the stories of the people that struggle to make through it are also pretty unbelievable.
I bet. Death race. It's just yikes. You're right.
Hey, but I'm gonna tell you what. I'm gonna tell you one thing. Another lesson from him that I find interesting, and going back to this year is about accountability. for us in our mastermind group and also automation. Okay. On the tech side, I think everybody who's working with technology, and that's everybody listening to this call, we got to find a way to automate more of those tasks. Okay. But you got to be accountable in order to implement that stuff. But here's the thing about the Spartan races is that when he originally started it, he would find that he would have thousands of people register and pay money and not show up for the race, right? They just wouldn't show up. It was too cold that morning. They just decided that it was a long week of work. They didn't want to drive, whatever it would be. So what he started to do is he started making it a requirement that in order to be accepted, you had to actually make a public declaration and make a post or create a classified ad and actually declare to people who you held in a high standard that you were going to this race. And immediately by doing that, people showed up. And so going back to, in our mastermind group, we believe that the three things and what we hold ourselves to is when it comes to commitments, we need to make it public. We got to find a way to make it hurt. And we got to take away all exit strategies. In other words, burn the boats. So they're create the desperate ground. Sun Tzu says desperate ground. If there is no way to retreat back home, it's either ride or die. And you get the best out of people in that situation because there's no backup plan.
Yeah. I was going to ask, did Albie give you that shirt or?
No, I got this at a trail race. This is in Texas. There's an organization called, and I'm sure it's David Goggins. Those of you out there who know who David Goggins is, he's an author. Wrote "Can't Hurt Me," recently released, never finished. That's an amazing story. But I think he seems to have made this outside of service members community who are familiar with this and historians who might know this. It's a reference to Julius Caesar back in the day who burnt the boats. His army was intimidated by the opposing forces, wasn't motivated to fight. And so in order to create that motivation, he burnt the boats. And so there was no going back home, guys. We were going that way. And that's it. And so whether it's him or you heard it from David Goggins, a lot of people have heard it. And there's an organization called Trail Running Over Texas here that put on a lot of trail running races. And this is one of the shirts.
How did you get so into running?
I wasn't. Okay. I wasn't. I still am not. Listen, I have to talk myself into it every time. I rarely am like, all right, ready to go. Lace up those shoes.
I see you post all the time that you just got done running like an insane amount of miles and,
I'm consistent. Yeah, I'm consistent. I started probably 4 years ago. I'd have to go on Facebook and look because I pretty much have created my own public declaration by making that post every time. And so if you go on my personal Facebook page and you scroll, unfortunately, good or bad, you're probably going to see 90% running stuff because I make it a point. It's part of my process, right? I've connected it to my process, which allows me to be more consistent with it. But probably about 4 years ago, a buddy of mine went to a place here called Arbor Hills Nature Preserve, and it's a great place to take dogs, and there's trails. But I didn't run. I haven't ever ran. Okay. I grew up in California. I was a skateboarder and, aggressive sports, but running, no, thank you. And one day we went out there to that Arbor Hills and for whatever reason ran quite a distance and it just triggered something in me. And I tend to like things that make you want to quit and that are a mental challenge more than almost physical. And so running, I believe, definitely is that. And so from that day forward, I started kind of consistently running. In 2019, I think it was, I had set the goal 2020 was it, because I set the goal to run 2,020 miles in 2020. And I didn't make it, ran over 1,000 miles, didn't make it.
Awesome though.
If you break it down, it's not that far per day. But I tell you, just like whatever those high leverage activities that we should all be doing every day, man, if I take a day off, it just rolls into the next day. And pretty soon I ended up having to run 10 miles every day to just keep up pace and where I needed to go. So those days off feel good. But the next day when you got to put in, and that next day could be tomorrow, it could be the end of the year, the end of the quarter, or when rent's due. But when you got to put in that extra mile because of those days you took off, rarely is the day that you took off worth putting in that extra mileage at the end.
I hear you. So how long have you been working with NAEA?
I hooked up with Jay and Mike and NAEA in 2015.
Okay.
I'd spent, like I mentioned, almost 20 years in the investment side of the
Right.
business. And, to paint a picture of what that really means, it's cold calling investors across the country,
Yeah.
300 calls a day or 3 hours of talk time, sending out prospectuses, calling people up, trying to get them to, invest six-figure amounts, write a check over the phone, sight unseen, all that kind of stuff. There was nothing really glamorous about it unless you made some money and you quickly found a way to waste that. Trust me.
Yeah.
But I was looking for a change. You tend to get burnt out, or you get pushed out, or make a choice to leave something that you don't enjoy, regardless of what the material benefits are.
Right.
And if there are material benefits, but you don't enjoy it, you'll find a way to quickly make those material things disappear, whether through self-sabotage or whatever. And so I was at a point where I wanted to change and had some skill sets that were applicable in a lot of areas. I hooked up with Jay and Mike by answering a corny ad, I think, on Craigslist or something at the time, and walked into a brokerage. They had in Addison, Texas, sat down with Wally Bressler, who was one of the top strategic real estate coaches in the business.
Yeah. I talked
And
to Wally.
he said, I think you're overqualified for this job, man. You sure you want to come in here? I said, dude, I'm just starting over and I'm willing to do whatever. And so I joined Jay and Mike. They had a brokerage with about 10 inside sales agents who made calls to expired, canceled for sale by owner, home value leads, circle prospecting data.
Right.
It's all they did for 8 hours a day. And I sat down in cubicles and made those calls along with them and set listing appointments. We had a predominantly listing driven business, closing over 300 transactions a year with that model. And so that was the initiation of my my relationship with Jay and Mike and NAEA. And since that, role's grown a lot over time, and we've done a lot of great things and helped a lot of great agents and continue to.
I think that NAEA is like the most amazing coaching that and training, that I've ever had. And it's really interesting to hear that you got into this relationship with them through the real estate side, making calls and doing the nitty gritty that we all do every single day, to get the job done. And it developed into the National Association of Expert Advisors. It just blows my mind, everything that it does for the agent. Like anytime I've had any kind of question, I go back into training modules and I look for the information there. I mean, it's there.
Yeah, what I find interesting is, especially right now, is stuff that you might have considered old school, is back to new school, or and it's getting back to basics, like you talked about with our mastermind group. And what Jay and Mike created initially was built for times of uncertainty, times of a competitive market. There's roughly 4 million or so licensed real estate agents in the country, and you need to find a way to stand out and differentiate yourself. And that's what NAEA's training was really about at the core, is differentiation, positioning yourself as an expert advisor versus a traditional real estate agent, and being able to really unpack and describe in a way that's meaningful to your prospect, your buyer or seller, being able to describe what your value proposition is. And a lot of people have never even heard the term value proposition, let alone know how to articulate that in a meaningful way so that it influences the decision of somebody choosing to work with you. And so that's what our training was about. But any training, you've got to have something that you rely on as a process. And that process is the path out of poverty. Okay. If you're not making any commissions, whatever it might be, is a process that's the path out of that situation.
Yeah. And, you brought up, people just need to know the process. Like so many places that you go, so many different brokerages, they all have different values. They have different ideals, right? Janelle and I were at a different brokerage before EXP, and they just didn't teach us what we needed to know. We're like, what do we need to do? Well, you need to grind harder. Okay. At what? You know, it wasn't like, okay, go ahead and make phone calls. Okay, where are these phone numbers coming from? You know, they weren't like, okay, go ahead and invest in RedX, or, you know, get one of these automated systems to generate these numbers to help you make calls. You know, it was just grind harder. And once we came over here and we got hooked up, you know, with the McCarthy's and NAEA, I mean, it just completely turned the light bulb on, you know, like really turned our whole business around, turned our mindsets around. I think it's a really great thing that is offered to agents at every level. You can get something out of it. And like you said, we're in a time right now where it is back to the basics. It really is sitting down and calling your database, making sure that you're reaching out to those people that have been reading your emails and automated text messages, but are probably wondering, is this person going to call me, or are they just, you know, stringing me along? Because at some point, somebody's going to call that person in your database, and they're going to get the business, you know? So I think you're right. It right now, with the way that the market has shifted. I mean, if you're not knocking on doors and doing open houses and calling your database, you might be falling behind.
Yeah, and you got to interrupt people where they're at these days. Okay, you don't go out on Main Street and look for the general store. You go online and you find, you know, information through your feed or on the internet, and whoever's paid the most, whether it's running an ad or they've got the best SEO, you know, practices or whatever it is, right? People are interrupting you where you're at, and that's how most of us are choosing to engage with who we do. Now, there's familiarity that's built up over time, and so when we make that choice, you know, it's oftentimes because of some of you know, the familiarity that's been built up over time. But you got to interrupt people where they're at and reach out to them.
I love that you brought that up, because, you know, every real estate agent, for some reason, like, their goal is to have a billboard. And I thought about that one day, because I mean, I got there to that point where I was like, why do I want a billboard? And I really just like broke it down. Matt, why do you want a billboard? It's so I could see myself driving to work and back every day. You know what I mean? Like, when it comes down to it, everything that I've done as far as search engine optimization for a business, that's where the eyeballs are. You know, it's that internet visibility. That's where the money should go. And it's a whole heck of a lot cheaper than having a billboard and a radio ad. And, you know, like, everybody's going to see it when they go online. When they hit Facebook, they hit Google first. Your ads coming up. You know, if you attach an ad pixel to a listing, it's going to come up every single time those keywords are hit. And it's just a whole lot more beneficial for your business to make sure that your SEO is in line than to have the billboard. So you can, you know, I always think it's funny when people get a bus bench, right? Like, I want people that are taking the bus to know that I'm a realtor. More than likely, maybe some of them might be in the market, but I just don't feel like that's my target market, right? Whereas with internet marketing, you can, you know, use just a little bit of keyword marketing goes a long way. And yeah, it's just way more beneficial and way cheaper.
Well, and you know, it's definitely a place to start. I think it, you know, and depends on the situation. If you're in a small market, or you know, in an area where there's that main intersection that gets a lot of views, because as you said, you know, Matt, what we're talking about is eyeballs and where they're at today. Okay, everybody back in the day listened to the radio, then it was TV, you know, and through a lot of other mediums. But today, you know, most of the eyeballs are on their phone. And so if the goal is to get the most impressions, there's a much cheaper way of doing it. Okay, now if you know what your metrics are, and there's a lot of people probably who are doing large teams who are doing radio and doing billboards and things like that, but I promise you that along with that, and what creates exponential rates of return for the radio ads and the billboard and everything else are those processes that underlie that. And it's, if somebody sees a billboard and they happen to go on and type my name into their web browser, what's going to come up then? And while they might see my billboard going to and from work or whatever they do daily, when that point comes in which they're ready to make a decision, okay, you have people that are in the consideration stage and you have people that are in the decision stage, and you actually have people that are in the awareness stage who just realize that they might need to make a move. But when you've got somebody who's in the decision stage, what are the chances that they're going to be looking at your billboard when they're ready to make that decision versus the chances that with a well-planned strategy, you could show up in their feed and get the benefit of familiarity because of the billboard. And so you create as Jay Abraham refers to, you create an omnipresence where all that stuff works together to attract business, rather than you having to chase. And for most agents, for most, it's much more affordable to start with some of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the rate of return is typically a lot higher for them.
Yeah, that's the case for me personally. I'm kind of cheap though when it comes down to it. I watch every little.
Well, listen, you can run every billboard you want, and what really matters is what your profitability is.
Yeah.
There's teams that are doing 1,000 units a year and have zero profitability. Okay, you could be closing 50 deals a year and have profitability, and so there's a big difference between the two.
For sure. Well, hey man, I really appreciate you coming on today. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Stick around for a moment.
I will do, man. Thank you for having me on, Matt.